whatever they might be, let's say meat and potatoes. We're gonna be looking at the percentage change in the quantity of good A that's demanded, given some price change of good B, okay? So it's still the percentage change in quantity over the percentage change in price, but in this case, we've got one good's quantity change in the numerator and the other good or service's price change in the denominator, okay? Now, this is important. Whether or not this number turns out to be negative or positive will tell us something, okay? So far, we haven't really cared about whether or not when we do this calculation from the formula, it's positive or negative. We've said absolute value, it doesn't matter. In this case, and as well also the income elasticity, it's going to matter. Whether or not this comes out as negative is going to tell us something.
Are these like goods usually going to be like complements or like substitutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in the event that we get the number 0, let's say we're looking at two different products and we do our calculation and it comes out to be 0, that means those two goods are unrelated to one another. Unrelated, like diamonds and water. You know, they're not related. They're not substitutes for one another. They're not necessarily goods that are purchased together for any reason. They're not complementary. They're just unrelated. So if they had a cost price elasticity of demand that we were looking at, the result would be 0. The quantity of diamonds isn't gonna change given some price change in water. Does that make sense? All right. Okay, so let's take the example of cross price elasticity of demand between buns and hot dogs. So hot dog buns and hot dogs. The fact that this comes out to be a negative number means that they are complements. They are complements. So when we do our examination of this, a negative cross price elasticity identifies a complementary good, okay? You're gonna buy less of that good when the price of the other goes up. And you're going to buy more of that good if its price goes down, okay? So if this number comes out to be negative, it means the two goods are complements. Now, the fact that this is close to 0 means that they are very complementary to one another. Essentially, the closer they are to that sort of 0, the more complementary they are. The farther away you get from that, that means they are less complementary. Or wait a minute. No, I said that wrong. I'm so sorry. Please erase that. The more away from 0 they get, the more complementary they are. Sorry. So sorry. Not less. Okay. But nevertheless, a negative number means they're complements. And then the higher the magnitude of that negative number, the more complementary those two goods are to one another. Sorry. I'm having a brain burp. Okay. If the number is positive, that means that those two goods are substitutes for one another. And again, in this case, the higher that number is, the more substitutable those goods are for one another, okay? You don't need to worry about brackets, by the way, on that one. Okay, here's where you will have to worry about brackets. Okay, so if we do income elasticity of demand, if we use that formula and we plug in the numbers, etc., again, in this case, the percentage change in quantity demanded is going to be in the numerator, but now instead of price, it's going to be a percentage change in income. And you will use the midpoint method for both to figure out what the percentage change is for income as well as in the quantity demanded. If income elasticity of demand is greater than 1, then demand is income elastic. Okay, so if income elasticity of demand is greater than 1, demand is income elastic. That means that if your income goes up by a small percentage, your quantity demanded will increase by some larger percentage than that, okay? If the number that you get when you do this calculation is greater than 0, but less than 1, demand is considered income inelastic. Income inelastic. So these would be probably things that are necessities. Okay, most goods are considered income inelastic if they're things that you need, like the different medicines that you take for any medical conditions, or health-related things, your heat, your basic necessities like rent, your heating bill, your utilities, things like that, okay? So these, if they're positive numbers, okay, they will give you something, income elastic or income inelastic, and that is for normal goods. A negative income elasticity will identify an inferior good, okay? So if you do that calculation and you come up with something that is negative, that means that good is an inferior good. Because as your income increases, you are going to demand a smaller quantity of that good. Does that make sense? Okay. So that number in the numerator is going to be negative. Yes?
Does anything happen whenever it's exactly 1?
Oh, you mean exactly to equal to 0?
Oh, wait, never mind.
Okay. Any questions about this before I move on? Okay. Just to reiterate, a positive income elasticity identifies a normal good, a negative one identifies an inferior good for the reasons we've already talked about. Okay? Okay. I want you guys to practice. All right, you can work with your table mate on this.